Hi, I'm Dom Starsia, head lacrosse coach for the Chrome lacrosse team here on Pro Lacrosse Talk.
On Schreiber.
Sidearm whip, scores!
Now in front, Pennell scores! Paul Rabel splits two and scores!
Kylie Ohlmiller showing off those shifty skills.
Kelly, not shy, bounces one home! What a start!
Welcome to Pro Lacrosse Talk, the voice of Pro Lacrosse. All right, so Coach, appreciate you joining us. You went to Brown Lacrosse where you coached. Tell me about when you first picked up a stick. I read that you didn't know much about the game prior to attending Brown. So how was that experience, your first experience with lacrosse?
It goes a little further than not knowing, knowing only a little bit about the game. I didn't really know anything about the game until I got to college. I grew up on Long Island, born in New York City. I grew up on Long Island, which may sound a little strange to people, but my high school just didn't have it. We were a little oasis of ignorance lacrosse-wise. So I'd never seen it before I got to college. I'd heard of the game, but I'd never seen it before I got to Brown University in the fall of 1970. And in the days when you had to play on freshman teams in your first year, I happened to be the captain of the freshman football team, and a buddy on the football team, asked if I wanted to go out for lacrosse. And frankly, at that point in my career, I felt most comfortable in the locker room, more so than I did in the classroom and other places. And so I said, sure, I'll give it a try. And literally, it almost sounds like I'm making this up, I just fell in love with the game immediately, almost as if when I picked up the stick the first time, it's like I felt like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I mean, it was almost like that. And I immediately wanted to be, I was a pretty good athlete. I immediately wanted to be known for being more than an athlete. I never put the stick down, and so there's a lot of good lessons that I can draw on when I'm talking to young players. About do you want to be good enough? Do you want to impact your team? What effect can you have? Things like that. And so played freshman lacrosse and then on the varsity the next 3 years and graduated. The head lacrosse coach was also the head soccer coach at Brown at the time, and he asked me to be his assistant. And so almost the day I graduated, I became the first assistant in soccer and lacrosse, and literally I'd never kicked a soccer ball until I started coaching it. And, as I've gotten older, frankly, I do spend a little time thinking back to, the length of my career, the length of my career in lacrosse. And here I was kind of a naive, silly college freshman who made a decision probably in a dorm hallway. Sure, I'll try that. And here I am, almost 50 years later, coaching in the PLL and talking to you guys and doing some of these things. So I don't take it for granted. I am struck by how my career has unfolded.
Well, that's awesome. We're also curious when we were reading about your kind of time at Brown as a player. You played offense when it came to the football side of things. So what made you pick the defensive side of the ball when it came to lacrosse?
Yeah, well, there's a bunch of ironies as my career unfolded. I actually started as a midfielder. I was a midfielder the first 2 years, and I thought I was going to be an offensive player. I worked really hard to work on my stick work, and it was my junior year, and I actually was running on the first midfield, and it was the Wednesday before our first game, and the head coach and the assistant coach, Bob Scalise, who happens to be the athletic director at Harvard, was the assistant coach at Brown at the time, and they told me to go back in the building, go back in the locker room and get a long pole, and so it was the Wednesday before our first game in my junior year in college when I became a defenseman. And ironically, we played Virginia in that very first game. And so on Saturday, I found myself covering Tom Duquette, who was a 4-time All-American attackman, and he showed me a couple of things that I hadn't seen on the pavement in Rhode Island in the cold preseason and all. So then I played defense for probably the next 25 years, and I still play now, actually. Just last week, I played up at Lake Placid in a division that I helped organize, a 65 and over division, and now I'm a crease attackman. As a defenseman, you have some responsibility to stay near your guy, and I didn't. As a crease attackman, you get to make your own rules in terms of how much you're going to move around, and And so I still love doing it, and I got a bunch of friends that we played together for years and years, and so it's always fun to get together.
That's awesome. Now, do you do Lake Placid every summer with that same crew?
Yeah, I've only my roommate in college was a Mohawk Indian from upstate New York here, which is where I'm located right now, and he lives on the St. Regis Indian Reservation at the top of New York State. David White, and David, it was the second year, so this is the 30th year for Lake Placid. So it was year number 2 when Dave called me and said, "Do you want to play in a tournament that they got organized?" I think the first year they might have had 6 teams involved total, and so it was year 2, and so I said, "Sure, I'll try that." I hadn't played lacrosse in a while. So let's see, 30 years ago was whenever it was. I was a head coach someplace, but I decided to give it a try and fell in love with it. Good bunch of guys from upstate New York, and we've been together ever since. And so I probably missed a couple of years in the 29 years that we've been playing, but only a couple.
That's great. That's fantastic. That you're still able to play after all these years.
Well,
so.
play. Your use of the word "play" is generous. So but it's a good group, and it's always fun to get together.
Absolutely. Well, going off of that, you mentioned a little bit kind of how you fell into the game, and then you kind of fell into coaching as well at Brown. But what made you kind of want to go the coaching route and choose that as a profession?
I graduated. I was certified. I was a history major in college. In terms of lacrosse, I was fascinated with the Native American roots of the game, and I did my methods and practice of teaching my senior year at Brown. I was certified when I graduated. I was accepted into a VISTA program, Volunteers in Service to America, a teaching program, sort of an AmeriCorps program, and when the full-time assistant at Brown, Bob Scalise, who I mentioned, got the head lacrosse job at Harvard, and so. After my senior year, and so during that year, the head lacrosse coach, needed to replace that position, and so he asked me if I would be interested in coming back and being an assistant coach, being a full-time assistant coach, and at the time I was would have been the only full-time assistant on the staff, and so I said, sure, I'll try that, and so that's how I started doing it. My dad, I was the first in my family on mom and dad's side to go off to college. I went to an Ivy League school. My father, for years and years, would ask me, when are you going to get a real job? And so I started coaching for $9,000 the first year, and actually, friends who used to say to me all the time, Ivy League guys don't stay in coaching, this and that, And so I actually applied to business schools. I'd been coaching for about 3 years. It was around 77 or so. I graduated in 74. I applied to business schools, and again, true story. I got accepted to both Virginia and Carolina. I thought it would be fun to go down and watch ACC sports for a couple of years and go to business school. Mm-hmm. But then the thought of doing that helped me to realize I don't want to do that. I never liked economics and the business side of things, and so the exercise of doing that, it kind of helped me come to terms with. Maybe I can do this for a living, and frankly, back in those days, if you'd asked me, I would have told you that at some point during my career I would have wound up as an administrator. But the more I coached, the more I realized that this is really what I love to be doing, that I much prefer the atmosphere in a locker room to a boardroom, and maybe there's a gene defect there somewhere, but the longer I coach, the more I realize this is really what I love doing, and so again, here I am.
I know just from reading articles about previous coaches, like Dick Adele had coached a few sports prior to just coaching lacrosse, and some of my college coaches had said they had coached previous sports. So tell us about the coaching the soccer side of things.
A lot of times it's a way to pay somebody some more money. So I started coaching soccer. Again, literally the day I started coaching was almost the first time I ever kicked a ball. Growing up nowadays, even football kids play soccer in their youth years because it's so organized. But in my days on Long Island, we didn't play soccer in my town. And I don't think anybody did really on Long Island. We all played, football, basketball, and baseball. And other towns would have played lacrosse in the spring, but I just never saw it. Brown was very good in soccer in those days, and so when I first started coaching, was literally the summer after I graduated from college. I didn't have to do thankfully I didn't have to do a lot. We had really good teams, and so but I learned to enjoy the game and appreciate the game. I was athletic enough to be able to participate with the players, on some fundamental level, and it was just it was a different experience for me that, again, when I'm talking to young players, I'm always talking about the fact that they should continue to play soccer and football and basketball and hockey, that these team games make you a better lacrosse player. They teach you the fundamentals of athletics, of athletic play, how plays unfold, the sense of anticipation and all. And so for me, it was an education in another sport and another way to do things, and I think it just made me a better coach overall. And I coached soccer for 6 or 7 years. I actually, the first year, they handed me, I was the head women's soccer coach also. So I was in the fall of my first fall, I was the head women's coach. I was the assistant men's soccer coach, and I ran fall lacrosse by myself, and so, now I always slightly chuckle when you look at, 3 or 4 assistant coaches on a staff, a director of operations, all these other positions that we all took care of ourselves at that time. It was just a different time, and but I recall all those days fondly. I was the women's soccer coach for 3 years, the first varsity women's soccer coach at Brown. I coached at my third year, and then they took it away from me and hired a guy full time to coach the team, and so Brown actually was one of the early pioneers on the women's soccer side of things, and I was happy to be a part of that.
Well, that's great. And then going from there, you coached at Brown until '92, and then you took the head coaching job at Virginia in '93, and while there you won 4 national championships. One in '99, '03, '06, and most recently in 2011. What led to your decision to go coach at UVA, and how was your time coaching at Virginia?
Yeah, well, we were very happy at Brown. My wife went to Brown also. My 4 children were all born in Rhode Island. When I came home, I heard one day during the day that Jim Adams, the former coach at UVA, before I took over, was going to retire. And I came home and I hadn't thought 1 minute during the day of possibly leaving to go to Virginia, but I came home and mentioned it to my wife that I'd heard that Jim Adams was retiring, and there's a book coming out in September, and the title of the book is "I Hope You'll Be Very Happy," which is what my wife said to me when I told her that Jim Adams was retiring. She said to me, "I hope you'll be very happy," implying you can go to Virginia if you want, but we're not coming with you. And so Virginia contacted me first, and I interviewed, and then I went down. My issue was, what I told them was that I had a complicated situation with the kids, that I had 4 children. 2 were in all the gifted and talented programs, and 2 were in the special needs programs. And so with the little ones, with the young ones, we had fought with the school districts in Rhode Island. They were busing all the special needs kids across town to one institution, and we wanted them in the local elementary school. And so we fought for 2 years. They finally agreed, and then we wound up leaving and going to Charlottesville. The 2 little ones never started school in Rhode Island. But when I interviewed with the UVA people, I said to them, this is going to have much more to do about my family than it's going to have to do with lacrosse. And so when I interviewed there, they insisted my wife fly down with me. She spent the day in the school districts, and I spent the day on campus. And by the end of the day, we knew that Charlottesville was ahead of where we were in Rhode Island for services for the girls. That the school district was just further along, and so that made the decision easier. The lacrosse piece of it wasn't that complicated. I was very happy at Brown. I had coached there. I was coaching there. I had coached there for 18 years. I had just had my 40th birthday. I felt like if I don't take this opportunity at Virginia, we're likely to stay at Brown forever, and that I was young enough to start out on another adventure. And when my wife saw that the schools were going to be good, that was going to be a good situation for the kids. it was something that we were it was an easy decision for us to decide to come to Virginia, and it worked out great.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's great. And going off of that too, I mentioned the 4 championships that you had. You had all of them were kind of spread out. And we actually talked to Steele Stanwyck, one of your former players, about the 2011 championship. But what did you see in all those championship teams? Like, was there anything that stuck out that was similar when you guys made those runs, or were they all kind of unique in their own right?
Well, they're all certainly somewhat unique, but at the same time, now that I've had a chance to step back and I do a lot of speaking, I get calls from teams and programs and organizations to come and speak about things like this and to speak about leadership and or the requirements for success. And when I look back at those teams, and I had a chance to think about it, the common thread that ran through each one of them was outstanding leadership. I got to Virginia in '92, so my first spring was '93. We were in the NCAA. We were in overtime of the NCAA finals in '94. We lost in overtime. We got back to the Final Four in '95. We got back to overtime of the NCAA finals in '96. And lost in overtime. And so you come to appreciate how hard winning can be. And I often use the example of you look at Maryland. They win the men's championship in 2017, and it had been 42 years since they had won the one previous to that. They were 0 for 9 in NCAA final games. So here I am. It's 96, 97. We haven't won. And so what's the formula? What do we need to do? You spend all your time trying to figure out how to build a better mousetrap, and at the end of the day, I look out the window. It's the summer of '98, and it's the middle of the summer. You can know how hot it can be in Charlottesville, and I look out on our practice field, and there's a young man on the practice field. We have a hill adjacent to the field. He's running up and down the hill holding a 45-pound plate above his head, and it was Tucker Radebaugh, and on that, in the fall of '98, Tucker was going to be a senior on that team, and the sense of urgency when we first gathered that fall of '98 was, enough is enough, fellas. Virginia hadn't won a championship in 27 years at that point. We'd been close, obviously, but hadn't quite sealed the deal, and there was just a little different sense starting that fall, and we went we won our first championship in '99, and I say, the key is the leadership from within, internal leadership. You can't push it down from the top. It has to bubble up. And so from Tucker Radebaugh, to 2003 with Chris Rotelli, that 2006 team, that undefeated team, had 4 or 5 guys that took control of that team, to the 2011 group. Captains like Steele, but another guy by the name of Bray Malfris that just provided that leadership from within, commanded that locker room, and that to me is the common thread. And so when I'm talking to these groups and all, I talk about what some of those characteristics are, and that there. So it can take some different forms, but I've never had a team be successful without that leadership piece. And it doesn't always have to be a championship team. 2015 team, Ryan Tucker was as good a captain, as good a leader as I ever had. And we didn't win it. We didn't win the championship that year, but we played as close to our potential as probably any team I'd had previously. And so that's sort of the common piece that flows through all those teams.
Awesome. So you talked about kind of making that new adventure at UVA. You're kind of on a new adventure now this season with the Chrome and the PLL. So what made you kind of jump to the pro ranks, and was that a call from Paul Rabel? How did kind of coaching in the PLL come about?
Yeah, I coached in the MLL last year. I helped out with the Cannons. I actually could have been the head coach of the Cannons a year ago and decided I wasn't quite ready to do that, and so I was essentially the associate head coach for the Cannons last year. Enjoyed that experience. Sure. Was probably going to go back to the Cannons for this current year. Well, that was how I sensed it in the fall. Nobody really knew what to expect from the PLL, or whether or not it was actually going to happen. This is early in the fall, but I got a call from Paul, and we started talking. And I think that they have an advisory committee that I think Seth Tierney chairs, and 8 to 10 people that I think made a lot of the early decisions, the personnel decisions, and things like that for the league. And I think Paul was going to ask me to do that, and I had already thought about it some. And so then when we spoke, I mentioned to him early on. I said, "What about if I coach one of the teams?" And frankly, I think I caught him a little bit by surprise, and so it was like, yeah, that'd be great. And so, what worked for me was, frankly, a little bit more limited schedule than what they're doing over in the MLL. This is initially, before you think about the competition and the personnel and stuff, just in terms of the practical piece of it, a little bit more limited schedule than what they're doing in the other league, and the excitement of joining a sort of a new endeavor, a completely new endeavor. You're kind of stepping off a cliff a little bit, and so that intrigued me. The Cannons had been around the MLL had been around for a long time, and I don't wish them badly, but the thought of trying something new and being the head coach in this endeavor, after I talked to Paul and thought about it for a bit, I said, yeah, I think I'm going to try that, and and so here we are.
Yeah, that's great. And going off of that, how is it different from coaching in college? Because in college you coached a bunch of young guys, you kind of got to see them progress, and now you're coaching seasoned veterans. Many of them that you actually probably coached for or against in college. A lot of the Duke guys you faced in the ACC, like Matt Danowski, Ned Crotty. How's it been coaching those guys, that have a little bit more experience, and what have you done to kind of change your coaching style?
Yeah, I've coached, against almost everybody on our team and all the other teams, and so I was looking forward to getting up a little bit, more close and personal with these guys, getting to know them a little bit better, getting to watch them in action and all. The good and the bad of it. The frustrating piece of it is that I wish we had more time with them. I've told Mike Rabel, if I could have one wish for this league, it would be that we could practice one more time a week, and maybe in the future, if salaries continue to rise. I think right now, which is a big change in our sport, it may be half the guys in the PLL make a living in lacrosse, and so, they may be able to adjust their schedules. Let's say we brought everybody in another day earlier, for these weekends. Of the other half of guys that have real jobs, half of them could probably manage their schedule. So you might be talking about 25% of the guys, but that's a lot of guys still. And so we're not ready to do that yet, but maybe that's in the future, because there are things that we do on the field, mistakes that we might make, that I see as easily correctable if we could just practice them. When you're talking about transition defense, it's a full field exercise that you can't really visualize it unless you can see it, unless you can experience it. And so there are some things that I'd like to say, it's a little frustrating on the sideline at times that I can't impact things a little bit more than I would like. The plus of it is that which is, for me, is very much outweighs any problems. The pluses are getting to know these guys a little bit better. Getting to watch them up close. I liken it to some of the better teams that I had. What I miss the most about college coaching, about being with these guys, is being with them every day, is the practice field. What I really enjoyed was when I had good teams that were confident. You could give these guys a little grief on the practice field, and they would sort of give it back to you in a respectful way, and I just love that, and so with the PLL, that's what we have here. We got confident, confident players that, in 2 seconds, it's funny. I start coaching even a year ago. The players don't know my language. They don't know any of the drills. At UVA, after a number of years, the upperclassmen can quickly show the freshmen, the new guys, here's how we do this. Here's how we do this drill. Here's what he wants. But in the PLL, they don't have any idea what I'm talking about when I talk about describing a drill or setting something up. But I would tell you that in 10 seconds, they know exactly what you want. And then in another 10 seconds, they're nuancing the drill, to suit their own abilities and stuff, exactly the way you would want them to be doing it, So in all my years coaching, it was my best teams that had those qualities. They were really fun to be around. That 2006 team, it was a joy to be on the practice field every day. Those guys, they wanted to work. They wanted to be coached. They knew what you wanted. They knew what the level of play that was required. That's what it's like being around these guys all the time. They know what's required to be successful. They want to be coached. They want to be leaned on. They want to be told when they're doing things incorrectly, and they're fun to be around on the practice field. I just wish, again, that I had a little more time on the practice field so we could correct some things and we could just spend more time together on the practice field. When the games roll out, to be honest, there's not a lot for the coach to do. The games are only, they're 12-minute quarters. You only have 20 guys. So, when, Jordan Wolf was struggling a little bit earlier in the year, he was still playing every minute of every game, so it's not like you can take him out and put somebody. I don't have anybody better than Jordan Wolf on the bench, so they have to just work through it, in terms of Jordan, I spoke to Jordan, after the first couple of games. I called him up. I said, Jordan, what can I do for you? What drill do you want me to do? And he just said, Coach, I'm really sorry. I haven't been through a stretch like this in a while. And he said, I never remember being through a stretch like this. And he just was having a hard time finding the back of the net. And then he just kind of played his way out of it. So.
Because going off of that, he eventually got out of his funk, and him and Jordan McIntosh had a huge day in your guys' first win of this season. Obviously, let's talk a little bit about the Chrome season, a little bit of a disappointing season. How have you been able to get these guys to stay focused, even despite, some adversity?
Yeah, I had to. There was a little adjustment that I had to make, for myself, was not to, from the very beginning, just deciding, look, I'm not going to lose my mind here. They essentially handed us these teams, but it just, my way was just to, from the first day, was to say, look, here's what my priorities are, fellas. My priorities is that we're going to be supportive and we're going to of each other. We're going to speak to each other in a positive way. We're going to work hard, and take care of the things that we can control. And so the piece that for me, like I say, we keep score. We're all big boys. We'd like to have a better record than we did. We'd like to have had a better season than we've had. But at the same time, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's been gratifying that, frankly, I think we've played hard in every game. In the first half of the season, we were in overtime, 2 or 3 times, and hit the post twice in overtime. In the very first game, we played the Archers, and Justin Gooderding, slammed one off the post that wound up back at the midline in the overtime. And then the first game against Chaos, Jordan hit the post in overtime, and they, the other team went on to win the game and stuff. And so, so you even in the limited time that I have with these guys, they've sort of bought into what we're doing, which is that they're supportive of each other and we work hard and play hard, and I look at our team and, we're just a player or two away, the right guy. And so, I don't think anyone's gotten discouraged, and there may be some guys that are thinking to themselves, hey, this was a one-year thing for us. I think some of the older guys, came back to try the PLL for a year, so I'm not sure that we'll have everybody back. But I think if we can just add a player or two in the right spots, I think we can bridge that gap, and I think we're in the hunt very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So you kind of talked a little bit about kind of the growth of the professional game a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about the kind of growth of the game overall. Where do you see the game going? You know, they announced the potential of it being in the Olympics, obviously, in the next 10 years. International rules kind of just came out with a different format. What are your thoughts on kind of where the game's going forward?
Well, the game is going to be, it's a slow go at the college level. The growth of the game in the college level has been mostly at the Division III level and the club level. The problem is that with the big schools is that if you have big time football, you just are simply not gender equitable, and so it's really hard for those schools to add 40 more men to their roster when they're not equitable to start with. So, I really think that. I worry about Utah. They started the program. Everybody thinks that's great, but they are going to struggle to have a schedule until the Pac-12, starts men's lacrosse, which I don't see on the near horizon, and so I worry about that. And so in terms of the popularity of the game, the game is very popular the bellwether for lacrosse is probably still the college game. That's the final weekend, those final playoff games and all. But you're not going to see a lot of growth, I don't think, of new big programs there, or it's going to be very slow. This has been, I think, a remarkable year for professional lacrosse. The youth and high school level continues to grow again, but you don't see that doesn't get a lot of the national visibility. What's happened here with the PLL, and the MLL's had a good year also, but what's happened here in the PLL has been breathtaking almost, the fact that we have gone to these cities, I think that there may be a little disappointment with the live crowd at some of these sites in the PLL, but I got to tell you, it surpassed my expectations. We in the MLL last year, we went to Atlanta a couple times. Yeah. And there was nobody there, and we play in Atlanta a couple of weeks ago, and, we get 5,000 for 3 games in a row, to me, that's unbelievable. And so for that piece of it, and for the broadcast piece of it, the TV piece of it, all of a sudden you can see lacrosse on some platform of NBC every weekend, so I didn't, again, back to the beginning, I didn't know what we were getting into exactly. I didn't know whether or not this barnstorming model was the way to go, but maybe it is. Maybe it is. Maybe if these 6 teams that are 90% of the best players in the world are playing on these 6 teams, and they're coming to your city for one weekend, maybe you're packing up the kids and going to the game, and then the rest of the summer you sit at home in the comfort of your home watching the games on NBC. Maybe that's a better formula than the city-based formula, And again, I'm not here to knock the MLL, but maybe this just works better, in the summertime months and all. And so what's going on the PLL has, the TV audiences have grown every week, I think everybody thinks the TV broadcasts have been great, that the social media piece of it has been through the roof, and so it may just be that we're onto something here, and that this is actually the next big growth period. Certainly this summer is, but this is an avenue that will continue to grow, and I think it'll be really, really exciting for everybody if that continues to happen. So it's been fun to be involved with the operation. It's been fun to kind of watch it unfold, and it's exciting to think about the future. I think on balance, I think the PLL is having a great first year. When you think of this as being the first year of this endeavor, and a lot of things could have gone wrong, but a lot of things have gone right, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned both the social media, the television. I think, I spoke to Paul and Mike at the start of the season, and, this is before a lot of, we knew what the broadcast was going to be like. And they just talked about, coming from a clean slate, and I think they've hit on all the points, like you mentioned. We tend to get caught up in attendance, and attendance is important, but they kind of solved that with having an event-based, model where they're going to these cities, and it's it will never replicate championship weekend in college lacrosse quite yet, but that's what their goal was, to kind of replicate that in a different city each weekend. And then you add in, like you said, the television aspect of it. I work in broadcast television, so I think that's even more pivotal, because now you're going to all these homes in America, especially when they have the NBC games and the NBC sports games, and you're reaching new fans that way too. So, they took like a two-tiered approach to it. So I think you make some great points.
I don't know what spells success for them exactly. Does the social media explosion of it, can you sell that? Can you hang your hat on that? Is the broadcast television piece of it, good enough? And I think, from what I can gather, I think they're really happy with that part of it, with the broadcast television piece of it. And I know some people that are, investors in the league, and they were saying to me early on that the live attendance is the least important piece of the puzzle for them. They wanted to see the league get off to a great start. They wanted the broadcast to be first class. They wanted the league to be received well. I think although I haven't heard a negative thing early on. There was a little bit of I got a little feedback from some friends who watched the NBC Gold, the cable piece, that the language on it and stuff was a little bit much. But I think for the TV people, I think they're sort of happy with it.
Yep.
They want the frankness of it, and they manage that a little bit more with the NBC and the NBC Sports Network. But like I say, I've hardly heard a negative thing about the broadcast. Everybody that watches, and if the broadcasts if the audiences are continuing to grow, then people are coming back to them, and so that's a good thing overall. Maybe the most important piece of the puzzle, I assume.
Yeah, no, definitely. And you can tell like they put a lot of work into it, and working with NBC, it's an NBC production, so they want it to look the best, and you can just it feels like a real professional league, which I think may have been lacking a little bit in the past. But kind of going off of that, they have you on Twitter. I believe this is like your first kind of year on Twitter. How is being on social media been? I really like, you're one of the coaches that really puts a lot out there, personal stuff too, which I think is important, because I think that's the whole goal too of being on social for the PLL, is kind of get to know these players better and get to know the coaches at a personal level, not just lacrosse wise. So how has that been for you?
Well, when I first agreed to do this, they brought all the coaches to New York City and for some introductory stuff back in December or January, and so Tyler Steinhardt, who handles that piece of it for the league, told all the coaches, they told me, said, you got to go on Twitter if we're going to do this, and if you're going to do this. And I said, okay, just show me what it is. I have no idea what you're talking about. And I hadn't done anything about it up until that point, so I've only been doing it since December or January. And but the truth is that I'm enjoying it, actually, and I can't do it any other way than what you're describing. I'm not going to stand there and just for me, the X's and O's part of it, I still love it, but it's less interesting to me than the personal stories. That either whether it's my own personal story, or that of the players and people I know and people I run into and stuff. That's a much greater interest to me. I've done a lot of writing in the last few years. I've had a number of articles published in Inside Lacrosse and Lacrosse Magazine, and so that when I start, and I used to think of things in story length. I'd wake up in the morning, I have an idea for a story, I'd write the story and all, and so since I've been tweeting, I now think of things in paragraph length. Can I fit that into a paragraph? And I think to myself, Jesus, that's a little distorted, And I think it's just another phase I'm in my life, and so I am. I'm enjoying it. The personal part of it, which I appreciate hearing that you like that part of it, because like I say, I don't think I could do it any other way. Mm-hmm. And interestingly enough, so I start to tweet. I get a tweet from a guy that says to me, you should write a book. And so I tweet back to him. I said, well, we should talk. Yeah. And so then we go offline and communicate with each other. And I've had these series of articles that I've written. Over 50 essays that I've written about leadership and success and zone defense and things like that, and some personal stories. And he's a publisher, and I sent him all the stories, and and he said to me, he said he got him. He said, I couldn't put it down, Dom. I want to publish this as a book. So coming out in September, I have a book coming out, and it was all because of a tweet, so it's something to keep an eye out for, and it'll be. I still can't believe it's actually going to happen, but it'll really be cool if it works itself out.
Well, that's incredible. We'll be looking forward to reading it when it comes out. And you mentioned writing. If you ever, we do have a website as well. So if you ever want to write an op-ed on our site, you're more than welcome to, and we can help promote the book when it does come out.
I tell folks the same thing when I go and speak to. I speak to a lot of different programs. In the past year, I was at Harvard and Tufts and Dartmouth and the James Madison Women and Shenandoah Women and I just I have friends that say to me, you should have a website, you should charge people. Yeah. I've never charged anybody for it. If somebody offers to pay me, that's fine. But generally I just tell folks, I said, just give me a call and let's get on the calendar. Or like you say, if there's something I can do for you and you have an idea of something you want me to do, just let me know and I'll be happy to take a shot at it.
Yeah, I'll have to say I remember reading your letter to a freshman that was in U.S. Lacrosse magazine a couple of years back, and I coached in high school in Pennsylvania, and I sent that to all my players before they graduated. So that was something that they really appreciated. So
very nice to hear. That's actually one of my favorite pieces that I've written. And like I said, the whole theme of that was that it was a letter I wish I had sent to my son when he went off to college. So.
Yeah, so this has been great, Coach Starsia. We usually wrap up with a segment we call the 5 and 5. So now to get away from the big questions, we're going to go into some 5 simple answered questions. It's going to be lacrosse related for the first 5, and then just life related for the last 5. Adam will go first, but kind of put you on the spot, but they shouldn't be too tough. Yeah,
absolutely.
So just do your best, and we'll go from there. So Adam, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, absolutely. So first one, as a coach, do you have any pre-game superstitions or routines that you do on a game day?
I'm not a very superstitious guy, but I would tell you that I shouldn't be admitting this, but in 2006, I wore the same pair of pants for every game. I never washed them. It's the same pair of khakis. I think we wound up 17-0 that year. So, I'm a little superstitious anyway.
That's awesome. How about your favorite lacrosse memory? I know there's a bunch of them, but any that stick out in your mind?
It'd be hard to limit to one. People have asked me about, the great moments and stuff. When being at Zed Williams' graduation a couple of years ago, I think Zed came the furthest from when he committed to UVA to actually being a graduate of the University of Virginia. Being at his graduation was one of the most touching times of certainly of my career and in my life.
Number 3, which of your Chrome players do you find the funniest? Is the biggest jokester on the team?
There is no doubt that Connor Farrell is just a joy to be around.
All right. Who in the lacrosse community is someone that you admire or looked up to? Just kind of quick thinking. Who do you look up to in lacrosse? Could be previous coaches, teammates, anyone.
Yep. The person. I mean, there's lots of head coaches, lots of players I admire. But the guy in the game that I've admired the most over my career is Mark Van Arsdale, who was my longtime assistant at Virginia, now the assistant coach at Loyola College, and just one of the great minds in the game, and just a wonderful person.
Awesome. And then number 5, how do you clear your head, or before a game or after a game? We see you talk about mowing your lawn after some losses on Twitter. Is that your main way you clear your head? Usually after a game anyway, it's to try to get with my daughters as soon as possible. Getting in the days leading up to a game, you often forget your family and as you get preoccupied with things, and then when I can see Maggie and Emma after a game, it generally brings me right back down to earth, and then I'm ready to start over again.
That's awesome. That's great. I think the family aspect of lacrosse is one that is often stands out to me the most, at least. So that's the 5 lacrosse related questions. Now we're going to go into the 5 life-related questions. So kind of going off of that, what is your favorite thing to do in Charlottesville since you still live there? Any places you like to go?
It's funny. I don't mean to extend this answer too much. It's funny. Especially when I finished coaching, I didn't know where anything was in Charlottesville. To this day, I've been there now almost 30 years. I've never been to Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's home and stuff. For me, it was always about, I love to go to other games. I love to go to other sports and watch. I like to go to wrestling matches and women's soccer games and volleyball games. And so sitting in the stands and watching some other coach have to, suffer the slings and arrows, is what I would like to do as much as anything else.
That's great. So you mentioned that you studied history in college. What is your favorite time period in history to study?
My favorite time period in history to study, I love and it's related to lacrosse, and I probably haven't done enough studying of it, but I love to study about Native American. I love the Native American culture. I love to study it now and be a part of it. I'm very respectful of it. I was on the original Tuaraton committee. Mm-hmm. I love the fact that the Tuaraton group, went to the Native American people and asked if we could use the name on the award. And so that piece of it, those early years of American history, are what truly intrigued me.
That's awesome. So going off of that, do you have any hobbies or activities that you enjoy doing when you're not coaching?
I used to do. I have done some woodworking. I love to work with my hands. But more recently, it's the writing part. I like to write, and I feel like it may be a substitute for me for not. I wasn't ready to give up the ghost in terms of the sense of having something worthwhile to say to people on a daily basis. You're talking to college kids, and I think the writing has been a substitute for that for me, and so it may be overcompensating for the fact that I don't have a team to talk to every single day, and so I really do enjoy the writing.
That's great. Okay, so following that, what is your favorite meal, and do you prefer to dine out, take out, or cook at home?
My favorite meal would be just about anything Italian, probably lasagna. I married a lasagna, by the way. I married Kristen Lasagna. If you know Peter Lasagna up at Bates, then I don't love the food just because of her name, but I've always, if I had to choose, a good Caesar salad and a lasagna with some garlic bread, and I'm as happy as can be. And I can cook a mean one myself, but I'm just as soon sit at the local restaurant Vivace and have it there too. So.
Excellent. Now, congratulations to you and your wife. I know you just tweeted recently that you're celebrating your 42nd anniversary, so I wanted to give you guys kudos for that. All right, so our final one is, what is a book on your bookshelf that you have read that you'd recommend to a teammate or a friend or a coach or one of your players?
My favorite coaching book is actually The Carolina Way by Dean Smith. I thought Dean Smith was a very grounded guy. It kind of caught me by surprise when I read it. Generally, UVA people are not allowed to like things that come in Carolina blue, but I loved he was well ahead of his time on social issues, and I really enjoyed that about him. I just thought he was very, very centered. His statement about being a worthwhile exercise to study a championship heart really struck home with me in terms of what I do and why I do it, and so I usually recommend that to young coaches.
That's awesome. And we'll both be adding your book soon in September to our bookshelf too. So
yeah, no, that's excellent. It's exciting to hear that it's coming out. Well, Coach Starsia, this has been awesome. We really appreciate it. Especially following a game weekend, we appreciate you coming on with us. But with that, that concludes our podcast, and we just want to thank you again for giving us your time.
Absolutely, my pleasure, fellas. We look forward to catching up again sometime.
Absolutely. Thanks, Coach.
Thank you, Coach.